The final part drops soon. Stay tuned, soldier. History is about to be made. The comparative analysis of American versus German tank development philosophies reveals fundamentally different approaches to armored warfare that the 76mm Sherman story illuminates. The final part drops soon. Stay tuned, soldier. History is about to be made. The comparative analysis of American versus German tank development philosophies reveals fundamentally different approaches to armored warfare that the 76mm Sherman story illuminates. German design philosophy prioritized individual tank superiority, engineering excellence, and tactical effectiveness at crew level. Each Panther or Tiger was a masterpiece of automotive engineering, incorporating advanced features like torsion bar suspension, interleaved road wheels, sloped armor, and high-velocity guns. But this excellence came with costs. Panthers required approximately 300,000 man-hours to manufacture, double the Sherman's production time. Panther engines were powerful but temperamental, requiring frequent maintenance by skilled mechanics. Interleaved road wheels, while providing excellent ride quality, froze solid in Russian winter and required disassembling entire suspension to replace inner wheels. German tanks were high-performance weapons that demanded high-maintenance support infrastructure. American philosophy accepted individual tank inferiority in exchange for mass production, mechanical reliability, and ease of maintenance. Sherman required approximately 75,000 man-hours to manufacture. Its radial aircraft engine, while underpowered compared to German diesels, was reliable and could be maintained by moderately skilled mechanics using common tools. Its vertical volute spring suspension was simple, robust, and field repairable. Sherman wasn't best tank, it was good enough tank that could be built in quantity and kept running under field conditions. The 76mm gun represented American systems flexibility. When battlefield feedback indicated existing gun was inadequate, response wasn't to design entirely new tank from scratch, which would take years. Response was to modify existing proven platform with a more powerful weapon that addressed specific deficiency while maintaining production continuity and mechanical reliability. This approach, iterative improvement of adequate design versus pursuit of perfect design, characterized broader American military-industrial strategy. Germans built Tigers. Americans built tens of thousands of Shermans, then improved them incrementally based on combat experience. By war's end, late-model 76mm Sherman, with improved ammunition, wet ammunition storage reducing fire risk, and horizontal volute suspension improving mobility, was substantially better tank than early 1942 Sherman, all while maintaining basic design continuity and mechanical reliability. The Soviet comparison provides additional context. The Soviet Union, facing more severe German armor threat than Americans, developed the T-34-85 in 1944, mounting an 85mm gun comparable to the American 76mm in performance. The T-34-85 arrived in combat earlier than 76mm Sherman, roughly spring 1944 versus summer 1944, and was produced in comparable numbers, approximately 30,000 T-34-85s versus 19,000 76mm Shermans. Both represented similar solution to similar problem. Existing medium tank inadequate against German heavy armor. Solution was upgunning existing chassis rather than designing new tank. Both achieved comparable results, improving tank versus tank combat effectiveness while maintaining production volume. This parallel development suggests that upgunning proven medium tank chassis was objectively rational response to German Panther and Tiger deployment, not uniquely American or Soviet insight. The British 17-pounder Sherman Firefly provides a counterpoint. The British achieved superior anti-tank performance by mounting a more powerful gun, 17-pounder with higher velocity and penetration than either American 76mm or Soviet 85mm. Firefly could reliably penetrate Tiger frontal armor at 1,500 meters, substantially better than 76mm Sherman's 800-meter capability. But Firefly came with trade-offs. 17-pounder's larger breech mechanism required removing hull machine gunner position, reducing crew from 5 to 4. The gun's recoil was violent enough to require major turret modifications and specialized recoil systems. Rate of fire was slower than 76mm, and critically, 17-pounder was a British weapon using unique ammunition that complicated American logistics. American evaluation of Firefly in late 1944 concluded that while it offered superior anti-tank performance, adoption would require either importing British guns and ammunition or manufacturing them in America under license, both problematic given existing 76mm production. The decision was made to continue 76mm deployment and develop improved ammunition rather than switching to Firefly design. This decision reflected American strategic calculus prioritizing logistic simplicity and production continuity over marginal combat effectiveness improvements. Was it correct decision? Arguably yes from a systemic perspective, even though individual tank crews who face Tigers beyond 76mm effective range might have preferred Firefly's additional capability. The technological evolution that 76mm Sherman represented would continue in post-war American armor development, influencing designs through Korean War and beyond. Lessons learned included maintain upgrade paths in basic design, allowing incremental improvements. Prioritize ammunition development as much as gun development. Design turret rings and internal space to accommodate future larger weapons. Ensure industrial base can rapidly scale production of improved variants. These principles shaped M26 Pershing development, which entered service too late for significant World War II impact, but became foundation of post-war American heavy tank lineage. Pershing-mounted 90mm gun, next evolutionary step beyond 76mm, and incorporated design features allowing further upgrades that produced M46, M47, and eventually M48 patent tanks of the 1950s. Sherman itself continued service well into the 1950s with various armies worldwide, many equipped with 76mm guns. Israeli Defense Forces operated modified Shermans, some upgunned with French 75mm high-velocity guns, into the 1960s, and achieved combat success against Soviet-supplied Arab armor during the Six-Day War. This longevity testified to basic soundness of the Sherman chassis and the value of upgrade paths that 76mm gun development demonstrated.
The economic dimension of American armor production deserves attention because it reveals capacity that made 76mm Sherman deployment possible. United States spent approximately $300 billion, equivalent to approximately $4 trillion in modern currency, on military production during World War II. Tank production represented roughly 3% of this expenditure, approximately $9 billion. This investment produced 49,000 Sherman tanks, plus 28,000 other tank types, light tanks, heavy tanks, and tank destroyers. Average cost per Sherman was approximately $44,000, roughly $650,000 in modern currency. For comparison, German Panther cost approximately 117,000 Reichsmarks, roughly equivalent to $65,000, suggesting German tanks weren't dramatically more expensive to produce, but German industrial capacity was substantially smaller. American tank production peaked at 2,100 vehicles per month in March 1944. German peak production was 750 vehicles monthly in July 1944. This 3-to-1 production advantage, combined with American industry's invulnerability to strategic bombing versus German production facilities under constant air attack, meant that equipment losses America could replace easily were catastrophic for Germany. As we approach the conclusion, consider sharing this video with anyone who appreciates deeply researched history. Your support allows us to keep uncovering these forgotten narratives. The human stories underlying statistical comparisons and technical specifications deserve final attention because wars are ultimately fought by individuals making life-or-death decisions in seconds. Tank crew experience was a uniquely intense form of combat, combining mechanized warfare's industrial scale with individual combat's intimacy and lethality. Sergeant Curtis Cullen, loader and 76mm Sherman with 2nd Armored Division, described crew dynamics during engagement in interview conducted 1946. When you're in combat, tank becomes your entire world. 5 guys crammed into a metal box, hot, loud, smell of cordite and sweat and fear. Commander is seeing battle through periscope, calling targets. Gunner is tracking target, calculating lead and elevation. Driver is maneuvering, trying to keep us behind cover while giving gunner stable platform. Loader, that's me, is pulling rounds from storage, loading breech, trying not to think about ammunition all around us that will cook off if we're penetrated. When we got 76mm, biggest change wasn't technical, it was psychological. Before, engaging German heavy tank meant accepting we probably die. New gun meant we might survive. That changes everything. You fight different when you believe you have a chance, more aggressive, more confident. Maybe that confidence saved us more than gun's actual performance. Hard to separate. This psychological dimension appears repeatedly in primary sources from tank crews. Material improvement in anti-tank capability was real and measurable, but the psychological impact of believing weapon was effective, that combat wasn't a suicide mission, affected crew performance in ways that amplified technical advantages. The contrast with German tank crew experience during the same period reveals mirror image of American evolution. German crews in 1944 began campaign confident in their technological superiority, and justifiably so. Panther and Tiger were dominant weapon systems that made German tankers fear Shermans only in overwhelming numbers or ambush situations. By late 1944, this confidence was eroding, not primarily because Sherman had improved, though 76mm contributed, but because German strategic situation was collapsing. Fuel shortages meant tanks couldn't maneuver. Replacement parts scarcity meant mechanical failures became permanent losses. Air superiority meant any movement attracted immediate Allied air attack. Most corrosive, knowledge that destroyed German tanks weren't being replaced while Allied tank losses were replaced within days. Oberlieutenant Karl Heinz, Panther commander captured in February 1945, described psychological evolution during interrogation. In summer 1944, we felt invincible. Our tank was superior. We could destroy Shermans at ranges they couldn't threaten us. By winter, superiority didn't matter. We had no fuel to maneuver. We had no air cover. American planes destroyed us from above before their tanks engaged us. When we did fight tanks, yes, some had better guns than before, but real threat wasn't improved Sherman. Real threat was 50 Shermans supported by aircraft and artillery. No tank can survive those odds. This testimony captures essential reality. Individual weapon system improvements, whether American 76mm gun or German long-barrel 75mm on late Panzer IVs, mattered tactically but not strategically. Wars of attrition, which is what Western Front became after D-Day, are decided by industrial capacity, logistics sustainability, and replacement availability. Germany was losing all 3 competitions simultaneously. The moral and strategic lessons from 76mm Sherman's story extend beyond World War II specifics to broader questions about military procurement and technological development. Several principles emerge. First, perfect is the enemy of good enough. American pursuit of adequate solution, 76mm gun on proven chassis, achieved results faster than pursuit of perfect solution, designing entirely new tank. Speed of deployment mattered more than theoretical maximum performance. Second, production volume and logistics trump individual platform superiority. German tanks were better. American tanks were more numerous and better supported. Numerical superiority won. Third, iterative improvement based on battlefield feedback is more effective than attempting to predict all requirements during initial design. Sherman was designed in 1941 for threats that changed by 1943.
Ability to modify design in response to experience was critical capability. Fourth, combined arms coordination and tactical employment matter more than individual weapons performance. 76mm Sherman succeeded not just because the gun improved, but because American forces used tanks effectively with infantry, artillery, and air support. These lessons influenced post-war American military procurement philosophy, emphasizing modular design, upgrade paths, and rapid deployment over achieving perfect specification before production. Not all lessons were learned perfectly. The American military has repeatedly struggled with over-engineered complex systems, but essential insight that adequate weapon system available in quantity defeats superior weapon system available in limited numbers has remained foundational. The alternative history question, what if 76mm Sherman had been available from D-Day or even earlier, is impossible to answer definitively, but worth considering. American tank casualties in June through August 1944 were catastrophic, particularly in Normandy hedgerow fighting, where engagement ranges favored German armor. Had 76mm been standard armament from invasion start, casualty rates likely would have been lower, perhaps significantly. But would this have changed war's outcome? Probably not fundamentally. German defeat was inevitable once Soviet Union survived initial Barbarossa assault and American industrial capacity fully mobilized. Western front fighting after D-Day was determining when Germany would be defeated and where Anglo-American versus Soviet lines would stabilize, not whether Germany would lose. Earlier 76mm deployment might have saved thousands of American lives, which from individual perspective is everything. From strategic perspective, it would have slightly accelerated Allied advance without changing ultimate destination. This tension between individual tragedy and strategic inevitability characterizes total war, where individual suffering occurs within larger context that renders individual actions almost meaningless except to individuals experiencing them. The technological trajectory that began with 76mm Sherman, progressively more powerful tank guns to counter progressively better armored threats, would continue through Cold War and beyond. 90mm on M26 Pershing gave way to 105mm on M60 Patton, then 120mm smoothbore on M1 Abrams. Each generation responded to threat presented by Soviet armor developments, mirror of how 76mm responded to German Panther and Tiger. This arms race dynamic, where one side's defensive improvements drive other side's offensive upgrades in perpetual cycle, has characterized armor warfare since tanks first appeared. Current main battle tanks mount guns and armor that would seem incomprehensible to 1944 tank crews, but underlying calculus remains identical. Can my gun penetrate his armor before his gun penetrates mine? The human cost of this technological competition appears in casualty statistics that, behind numerical abstraction, represent individual lives ended or irrevocably changed. American tank crew casualties in European theater totaled approximately 26,000 killed, wounded, or missing from June 1944 to May 1945. German tank crew casualties are harder to determine precisely, but likely exceeded 30,000, given heavier combat exposure and fewer medical resources. Each casualty was young man, typically early 20s, who trained for months, crossed Atlantic Ocean, climbed into a metal vehicle, and faced enemy in combat that offered no middle ground between survival and death. Tank warfare didn't produce many minor wounds. You evacuated safely or you burned. Those statistics, dry and numerical in historical accounts, were lived experience of terror, pain, loss for tens of thousands of men and families who loved them. Sergeant William Downs, sole survivor of 76mm Sherman crew destroyed near Bastogne in December 1944, described experience in a letter written decades later. We were moving up to support infantry when Tiger hit us from tree line. Round penetrated driver's compartment, killed him instantly. Fuel caught fire. Commander and gunner died trying to evacuate through the turret. Loader and I got out through hatches as ammunition started cooking off. I remember thinking, we had better gun now, we could fight back. But it didn't matter. Tiger still killed us. Better gun means better chance, not certainty. I think about the crew often. Young men who should have lived full lives, married, had children, grown old. Instead, they died at 22 in Belgian field because tank warfare is unforgiving and margins are thin. 76mm gun saved crews and other tanks, didn't save ours. That's combat. Randomness and violence and nothing fair about it. This testimony captures essential truth about military technological improvements. They increase survival probability without guaranteeing survival. Each marginal improvement, whether 76mm gun or better armor or improved tactics, saves some lives while others die anyway. From a systemic perspective, saving some is success. From an individual perspective of those who die, improvement means nothing. The post-war fate of 76mm Sherman illustrates the weapon's extended utility beyond original wartime purpose. American forces retained substantial Sherman inventory after 1945, with 76mm variants forming the backbone of tank units during the immediate post-war period. When Korean War erupted in June 1950, the M4A3E8 Sherman with 76mm gun and improved suspension was frontline American tank, facing Soviet-supplied North Korean T-34 85s. Combat performance in Korea validated 1944 development decisions. 76mm gun could penetrate T-34 85 armor at combat ranges, providing reasonable parity. Sherman's mechanical reliability in difficult terrain proved superior to T-34s. American tank crews, many of them World War II veterans, used experience and tactics to defeat numerically superior North Korean armor during the war's opening months. By Korean War's end in 1953, Sherman was clearly obsolete, superseded by M26 Pershing and M46 Patton in American service. But 76mm Sherman had proven itself adaptable enough to remain combat effective across 2 wars and multiple theaters against different opponents, a testament to the soundness of the basic design and wisdom of upgradable weapon systems. International service of 76mm Sherman extended far beyond American forces. Britain, France, Israel, Pakistan, India, and dozens of other nations operated Sherman tanks post-war, many specifically requesting 76mm variants for superior anti-tank capability. Israeli modifications of Sherman, including installation of French high-velocity guns in diesel engines, produced Super Sherman variants that fought successfully into the 1960s. This longevity, Sherman serving frontline combat role for over 20 years, from 1942 introduction to 1967 Six-Day War, was unprecedented for a tank design and reflected the weapon's fundamental versatility. Few weapon systems remain combat effective across 2 decades of rapid technological evolution. Sherman did, largely because its design incorporated upgrade paths and modularity that allowed continuous improvement.
The final accounting of 76mm Sherman's historical significance requires balancing technical achievement against strategic context. From engineering perspective, 76mm gun represented successful upgrade of existing platform to meet evolved threat, achieving results faster and cheaper than developing entirely new vehicle. From battlefield perspective, it provided American tank crews with adequate tool to engage German armor at combat ranges with reasonable survival probability. From strategic perspective, it was one component among many that enabled Allied victory in Western Europe. The weapon didn't win war. No single weapon did. but it contributed to victory by improving American tactical capabilities at critical moment when tank battles in France and Germany determined campaign tempo. Measuring that contribution precisely is impossible, estimating that thousands of American tank crew members survived combat they might otherwise have died in, because 76mm gun allowed their tanks to fight back effectively, seems reasonable assessment. The closing image remains with us across decades. A 76mm Sherman, long barrel elevated slightly, hauled down behind earthen berms somewhere in Germany, spring 1945. 5 crew members, young men far from home, scanning horizon through periscopes for German armor that might appear. The gun that gives them a fighting chance. Not certainty, not guarantee, just chance, where before they had none. That improvement, from helpless to dangerous, from automatic victim to potential victor, was what 76mm Sherman provided. Not equality with German heavy armor, not technological superiority, just adequacy, combined with overwhelming numbers and industrial capacity that made adequacy sufficient. German panzer crews were stunned when they saw 76mm Sherman's firepower, not because weapon was revolutionary, but because it closed gap between American and German armor capability enough to change tactical calculations, introduce doubt where certainty had existed, force caution where aggression had been safe. In a war of attrition that Western Front became, where Germany fought with fixed resources against opponents with unlimited industrial capacity, every marginal improvement in Allied capabilities accelerated inevitable German defeat. 76mm Sherman was one such improvement, not decisive alone, but combined with thousands of other advantages, material, numerical, strategic, tactical, psychological, it contributed to the outcome. The men who fought in these tanks, who loaded these guns, who fired at German armor at ranges measured in hundreds of meters, who survived or didn't based on seconds of time and inches of armor and quality of gunner's aim, these men experienced 76mm Sherman not as historical artifact or technical specification, but as a tool that might save their lives. For some, it did. For others, it didn't. But it gave them a fighting chance. And in war where tanks faced tanks in direct combat, with outcomes determined by penetration and armor and range and luck, fighting chance was all anyone could ask for. That chance, that marginal improvement in survival probability, that closing of the gap between American adequacy and German excellence was 76mm Sherman's legacy. Not the weapon that won war, but weapon that helped American tank crews survive war long enough to see Germany defeated and go home to lives they'd put on hold. That was achievement enough. That was contribution that mattered. That was what German panzer crews learned when they encountered longer barrel on a Sherman that had always looked the same and discovered that assumptions about American tank inadequacy, justified for years, no longer held completely true. The war was ending. American industry had responded. The gap had closed. Not enough to make Sherman equal to Panther or Tiger, but enough to make every engagement uncertain rather than predetermined. And uncertainty in military operations advantages defender and disadvantages attacker, creates hesitation where confidence existed, forces calculation where instinct sufficed. That hesitation, that calculation, that moment of doubt before engaging what looked like just another Sherman but might be variant with gun that could hurt you back, was strategic value beyond ballistic improvements. It was American industrial capitalism demonstrating capacity to identify problems, design solutions, implement changes at scale, and sustain complex operations globally while fighting two-front war. Germany couldn't match this systematic capability, didn't have resources, industrial capacity, geographic security, or systemic flexibility. German excellence in individual platforms, real and substantial, couldn't overcome Allied advantages in production volume, logistics sustainability, and adaptive capacity.
76mm Sherman wasn't reason Allies won World War II, but it exemplified how Allies won. Adequate solutions, deployed rapidly, in overwhelming numbers, supported by unlimited logistics, adapted continuously based on battlefield feedback. This approach, emphasizing speed and scale over perfection, characterized American way of war that would continue through the Cold War and beyond. The young men who crewed these tanks probably didn't think about such abstractions. They thought about surviving next engagement, about going home, about crew members sitting beside them in a metal box that was either protection or coffin, depending on luck and tactics and whether gun worked when they needed it. For them, 76mm Sherman meant they could fight back. That was everything. That was what mattered. That was why decades later, in interviews and memoirs and quiet conversations at reunions, they remembered it not with technical precision, but with the gratitude of men who survived because weapon was adequate to the moment when adequacy meant life or death. That's the story. German panzer crews were stunned because American tank that had been helpless became dangerous, because gap closed, because certainty became doubt, because war they thought they understood changed in ways they couldn't counter, because American industrial capacity, once mobilized and focused, could overcome German military excellence through sheer persistent adequate response multiplied by thousands. The 76mm Sherman wasn't best tank of World War II, wasn't the most powerful gun, wasn't technological breakthrough, was adequate improvement delivered in quantity when needed most. Sometimes, often, adequate is enough. This was one of those times. Thanks for staying with us through this entire journey. There are more untold stories waiting for you in our collection. Hit subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.